In this exciting DVD, Michael Berg invites you, challenges you, to discover the secrets to the perfect life, secrets which remain hidden within your very thoughts and actions. What you are about to watch is a special seminar Michael gave to his advanced students at the Kabbalah Center in Los Angeles while he was writing the book, Becoming Like God. Please note, at the time, the working title of the book was Becoming God. So, get ready, relax, and enjoy this extraordinary Michael Berg lecture, Becoming Like God.
Good evening. Thanks for waiting. The topic of this seminar, as you know, is Becoming God, on a book that we'll be publishing in September. And I've been working on this book for over a year now. And I have to say that I'm very, very excited. Very, very excited about the concepts. Very excited about getting it out. And as we go through this, I hope it becomes obvious to all of us, most of us, why this is so exciting. There's a story that I like particularly, I'd like to start with. It's from a great Kabbalist who lived a few hundred years ago. He was known as the Rabbi of Kotsk. And he tells that when our souls come down to this world, they are let down on a ladder. The Creator takes a ladder, puts our souls on them, and sends the ladder down to this world. And we go off that ladder, we're born, and different people react differently. Some people jump once or twice to grab the ladder that is now on its way back up. Some people jump 100 times. Some people jump 200 times, trying to grab and reach up back to heaven. He says, those who jump and never stop jumping, those are the ones that the Creator elevates back to Him. And that's really what this is all about. This is about how we can achieve, and the most exciting thing is that it's possible for us to achieve a complete union with the light of the Creator. Now, when we achieve that union, the things that we can accomplish, the things that we can do, are greater than anything we've ever imagined. There's a story, and this is something that Rav Ashlag speaks about in 10 Luminous Emanations. And this is one of the most important verses in the Bible. It says, when man was created, it says, B'Tselem Elokim Baraoto. Man was created in the image of God. That's a verse I think most of us have heard before. But what does that mean? We know that God does not have a body. So what does it mean that we are created in the image of God? And the Kabbalists explain, and this is an unbelievable, one of those lessons, and very often when I teach, I don't want to say it's frustrating, but it's, there are some lessons you can teach, and maybe if you repeat them enough times, they will be understood, and then there are some lessons that you either get or you don't get. And this is one of those that if you get, you're unbelievably excited, and if not, not. But it says, man was created in the image of God. And the Kabbalists explain that what that means is that every single one of us was imbued with all of the powers of the Creator. That means that literally, we have within us the ability to do everything that the Creator does. The Creator can heal, the Creator can bless, the Creator can even resurrect the dead. What the Kabbalists teach when it says in Genesis that we are created in the image of God, that means simply that each one of us was created and imbued with the ability to do absolutely everything. To heal, to bless, to even, as the Kabbalists say, resurrect the dead. Now, how, if we really understand that, and let's assume we even believe it, how do we sort of take the life that we see ourselves living now and reach that? How do we really become that part of God? The Kabbalists and Rav Ashlag also explain that literally as a rock is hewn from a mountain, our soul was separated from the Creator. Meaning that there is nothing different, really, between our essence and the essence of the Creator. Which again is an unbelievable thing. Literally, when we talk about DNA, when we talk about when you break things down to the most basic parts, everything that the Creator is, everything the Creator has in His essence, we have in our essence. It's an unbelievable lesson. I'd like to start off, and one of the things as we wrote down on the flyer, I'd like to really make this more of a dialogue, a conversation than a teaching, because again, as I said, one of the things that excites me about this concept, this idea of becoming God, is that those of us who get it, the type of light that every single one of us in this room, or at least those of us who really understand it and really take upon ourselves to live it, the type of light the type of change we can create for this world is unbelievable. And therefore, unlike some other teachings where it's important really, to get as many people as possible to understand it and live it, if we can get enough people to really understand this concept and really grow and change to become God, it's not an incremental growth. It's an exponential growth. The type of change that even if one of us achieves this, can you imagine? Right now, there's one creator in the world, and there's so much pain, there's so much suffering, there's so much darkness in this world. If there were 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 100 beings with that power, with that light, the type of change that it could bring. So I really would like this, and we'll see how this goes on this week and next week. But the one question I'd like to start off with, and I hope nobody here is shy, because one of the greatest ways we'll all learn is by each sharing with each other. We're going to talk a little bit later about God consciousness and what that means. But the first question that I want to ask, and I really would like to get at least a few answers on this, is when, every one of us has different times when we think. Some of us think in different times. I think sometimes in the shower, sometimes when I'm putting my kids to bed, but very often before I go to sleep. And the question is, what is it when you think about your life? When you think about your life, not maybe tomorrow or even next year, but if you think about your life, however long you believe you're going to be here, what is it that you would like to accomplish? What is it that you believe that you can accomplish? And I mean the grandest things, not, I'd like to make a little bit more money, I'd like to have a nicer car, a nicer house, and maybe for some of us that is the grandest dreams we have. But for the rest of us, what is the biggest dreams that we hope to accomplish with our lives? That's the question. Raise your hands when you would like to share something. There has to be at least one person. Yeah.
I truly want to be able to see and express the potential with which I was created.
And say your name before so we can.
I'm Karen Nesbitt.
So what Karen said that you want to see the potential that you have.
See and express it.
And express
I
it.
get glimpses, and I realize that the intelligence behind my creation is so much greater than what my understanding is, that I can't really picture it, but I can reach for it, knowing that with the tools of Kabbalah, I keep learning more and more and more, and revealing more of that potential.
But then ultimately do what with it? Or just reveal?
Peace on earth.
That you can bring that.
The interaction between myself and any others that I come in contact with.
Okay. Anybody else? We all have dreams. They don't have to all be spiritual, by the way. It'd be nice if they were. Your name?
Damien Lichtenstein. I'm a filmmaker, and what's amazing about film is that it's the light that comes through the lens that changes the molecular structure of the image and then is projected back onto the screen for us to perceive something about ourselves. And I genuinely believe that I have it within me, the ability to express the ultimate conversation of the light and have the rest of the world be transformed in the viewing of the images that are created by myself and the team that's behind them. I really believe that's possible. So ultimately, I think that's what I'm striving to do, is to remove the blocks in my own life, remove my Satan, correct my cocoon, to be able to express that ultimate creation. That's what I'm up to.
Okay. One more? Right there.
Michelle, when you get it, or when you get that connection or the feeling.
Get to the mic.
Oh. Hi, my name is Michelle. When you get a connection or an understanding, you have a sensation, and I think that if I can explain it and like grab a hold of it, then it's something that I could explain to somebody else and they could also experience it.
And ultimately do what with that?
If you can explain it to one person, they can explain it to the other person, then you have, you could share that sensation, or you could explain how to help other people to get that sensation.
Okay. And what I think, again, I was surprised at least to the extent that most of us are developed, but I guess the point that I want to bring across is that when we talk about becoming God, and very often it's one of those things a few years ago when I started writing books, one of the things that people always told me is you can tell people that it's too difficult. Because if you tell people it's too difficult, they won't want to try it. You have to keep it simple, make it manageable for people. But the reality is, what we're talking about now, becoming God, is not easy. It is the most difficult thing that any of us will ever try to do. But that is only because what we can accomplish with it is greater than anything we can believe, we can imagine. And literally, when we talk about becoming God, the first step is to have God consciousness. And that means to have a desire to change this world for the better, to change this world for the good. But it needs to be a constant consciousness. Many people are spiritual on many different levels. But the real spiritual giants, which we all can become and need to become really, is a person whose main focus in life, yes, we have our jobs and we have things that we do. But if we want to become God, then the main focus of our lives, the main consciousness of our lives needs to be, I want to assist the world to remove pain and suffering. If that is not our consciousness, constantly, if that is not our constant consciousness, there's no way we'll ever become God. And that's the first step. This is a concept, and I speak to different people at different times, and people are aware of this idea that it's important to sort of see the pain and suffering that that goes on in the world and to do something about it. But I think and hope that it's clear that what we're talking about now isn't just something that we do additionally with the rest of our spiritual work, but that it literally is the focus of our lives. And that doesn't mean we have to put aside everything else that we do, because we can do many things, but as long as the focus remains this. And there's a story that I'd like to share. It's one of my favorite stories. There were two great Kabbalists, and they were both getting older, and they made a pact between them. And they agreed amongst themselves that whichever one of them would pass away first, he would come back and tell the other one what had happened to him in the next world. So one of these Kabbalists passes away, and his friend waits. He waits a week. He waits a month. He waits a few months, and he's getting worried. Why hasn't his friend come back to him in a vision, in a dream, one form or the other, to tell him what had happened to him? So he goes to the son of this great Kabbalist, and he tells him the whole story. He tells him of the pact that they had between them, and he tells them that he began to worry, that he hadn't seen his friend come back to him, so he doesn't know what happened to him in the next world. He knew that if possible, his friend would have come back to him. So the son looks at the friend of his father, and he says, I want you to know that I myself was also concerned why my father had not come back to me, whether in a vision or in a dream, to tell me what had happened to him. So, as the Kabbalists know to do, he did what is called a raising of his soul. They are able to literally take their soul and elevate it to the upper worlds. And I went up to the upper worlds, and I walked around there, and I asked the people there, have you seen my father? Have you seen my father? And I walk, and I reach a certain group of people, and they tell me, yes, your father was here, but he continued walking. And I walk on the path that they showed me my father had walked, and I reach another group of people, and I say, have you seen my father? And they tell me, yes, we've seen your father. He was here, but then he continued walking. And this goes on, and I'm walking, and I'm walking. And suddenly I reach a group of people in front of a huge forest, a dark forest. And I ask them, have you seen my father? And they say, yes, your father was here, but he went through the forest. And I was a little frightened, but I went in his path, and I continued walking through the forest. And I come to the end of the forest, and I see my father, and he's standing there on a cane in front of a huge ocean. And I see that he's just focusing and looking at that ocean, not doing anything else. And I come up to my father and I say, we're concerned about you. We didn't know what happened to you. Why didn't you come back to us? So he says to me, the son says, do you know what this ocean is? And I say, no, what is it? He says, this is the ocean of tears, of everybody in the world that has ever cried from pain. This ocean is filled with those tears. And I swore to the Creator that I will never leave this ocean until the tears are all dried up. And this, and I hope for all of us, when I hear this story, this is something that every single one of us, one of the things about Kabbalah that is different maybe than other spiritual paths is that it's very democratic. There isn't a hierarchy of, people spiritual, obviously there are people with more information than others, but there isn't somebody who you need to connect to in order to connect to the Creator. Every single one of us, The goal of every single one of us, hopefully, is to become that spiritual giant. And in order to do that, the first step is to take upon ourselves that I, you, every single one of us, will do everything we can to dry up the tears. To dry up the tears of every person. And you know, one of the things that Kabbalah teaches is that not necessarily is that everything that we believe in will happen, but certainly what we don't have a consciousness for will not happen. And if we do not take upon ourselves as a first step at least, to make it our goal in life, to see the pain and suffering that is out there, and to do everything that we can to make it stop, we cannot become God. More importantly than that, we cannot achieve our spiritual potential. We talk about, the image of God. We talk about that potential that every single one of us has. If we do not make the focus of our lives to removal of pain and suffering for the world, we can be very spiritual people and we can do positive things. But if that is not the focus of our lives, we cannot become God. And more importantly, we cannot achieve the potential that we have. There's one other story in this realm. One of the things about stories, especially, true and ancient stories, and for me, I can say at least that it's not simply the information that it has, but the energy that it has within it. And I often go back to stories as often as I can because, again, these are stories from tremendous spiritual giants, and the story, besides the information that it gives over, it also gives us of their energy. And this is one of my favorite stories. The story is there was a great Kabbalist. His name is Mendel of Rimanov, and one of his students came to him. And he came to him, he was crying, his son was deathly ill, and the doctors had given up hope on him. And he comes to his master, to his spiritual guide, and he says, "Is there anything that you can do? Can you pray for him? Can you bless him?" So the master meditates and prays and meditates again for hours, literally for hours. And he sees that unfortunately the gates of heaven are closed. There is nothing that he can do to assist, to help the child. So he turns to the father. Of course, he's broken and the father is broken. And he says, "I'm sorry. My prayers, my meditation, they can't accomplish it. The gates are closed." The father, of course, is broken. He gets back on his horse. He's driving back home. And he's traveling for maybe a half an hour. And suddenly he sees behind him a horse driving quickly. He's getting a little excited. Maybe it's his master. Maybe there is actually something that his master can do. And he turns around and he sees that it's his master on his horse. He stops by the side of the road and waits for his master to come by. And his master catches up with him, and he says, "After you left, I realized that although I can't pray for you and for your son and help you, the least I can do is cry with you." And they sat down on the side of the road together and they cried. And the story actually ends that this child, through the crying of the father and the master, was healed. But the more important lesson for us, hopefully, for those of us who really want to become God, is that there is never a time when our sharing and caring for the other person ends. The master realized for himself and for us that even at times when we cannot necessarily help, we can cry with other people. And the important thing, again, there are different lessons for different people. Different people have different sort of goals in their spiritual development for their spiritual life. But if we want to accomplish becoming God, and that means, and it's one of those things that sometimes I'm a little sort of, I don't know if the word is scared, but a little apprehensive of talking about because it seems so fantastic. But it is true. It's not easy, but it's true. And the first and most important point, and it's one of those things, again, you can't talk on for too long. You either get it or you don't. And it's about focusing our lives on this concept. And this is what separates, as they say, not the men from the boys, but the spiritual giants from those of us who are simply spiritual. Somebody who makes his life focus, all his energy is put into this to end the pain and suffering. The next thing I'd like to do, and I hope we have these printouts, Rachel. We have, okay, if we can quickly spread these out. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the logic of this process. One of the things that is beautiful about Kabbalah is that there is a logic to everything. There's nothing that just say, just do it and, understand that maybe later. And one of the things I find, again, that separates really people, one of the things, again, and I speak about this actually in the book, but I've been thankfully around the center for many years. And I get sort of a pretty good, vantage point on different people at different points in their spiritual development. And I also see the differences between people who start off, and very often most of us start off excited, those of us who get, or at least continue on the path, and those of us that either peter off or are stuck. And one of the big differences are those of us who understand the logic, understand the process. And I'll wait for the sheets to be handed out. Okay, and it's one of those things, the great Kabbalist Rav Ashlag, he had a very nice phrase, or an important phrase, I should say. When he talks about different concepts, and of course, and those of you who've read from Rav Ashlag's books, he talks about many concepts. But when he gets to very important concepts, he says, go over this again and again and again, and he uses the Hebrew term, he says, until it's like in a box. Meaning, there are certain things that have to be not understood by us, but have to be so crystal clear that they're as if, sitting in a box, they're there for us. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I've noticed for this for myself, and I've noticed this also for others, is that what separates people from people who are simply spiritual, or people who are really on the path to becoming God, is a clarity of the process. It's not simply an understanding of the process, because understanding any of us can have. It's a clarity, it's a constant re-clarification of the process. Because if not, it's one of these things, and what I like about this, of course, and one of the things I think I should have mentioned probably in the beginning, one of the things that's exciting for me about this is that none of this is, of course, mine. All of these teachings are from the Kabbalists, certainly most of it from Rav Ashlag. But what they say is, and this is, you can repeat it so often, what we're about to go through, the logic of transformation, you can understand it, and that's fine. It probably won't do anything. You can really understand it, probably still won't do anything. If this is not something that is in our mind and in our life constantly, we're not going to change. And one of the things, when I think about what I'm going to teach or what I'm going to write, what excites me the most are things that can really create great change. And I hope for all of us, the seriousness with which we need to take these ideas is greater, like I said before, than anything else we've ever studied or ever learned, if we want to become God. So let's go through these, and again, what I'd like to reiterate is that it's not important or not enough to understand them. This is one of those things that we need to think about constantly and go over constantly until it's a consciousness that we have in our mind all the time. I'll read and then explain a little bit. Number 1. God is the source of unending joy, fulfillment, and life. This is a concept I'm assuming all of us are aware of, that the Kabbalah speaks about the light of the Creator. Everything that is positive in this world, everything that is good in this world, any enjoyment that we have in this world, they are all aspects or sparks of the light of the Creator. Anything that is not the light of the Creator does not give us joy. Whether it's food that we eat, whether it's the nature that we see, whether it's love that we feel, everything in our lives that gives us joy and happiness and fulfillment, all of that are aspects of the light of the Creator. To the degree we are connected to Him, we are connected to infinite joy and fulfillment, and we have eternal life. To the degree we are connected to the Creator, we have light, we have fulfillment, we have joy. Number 2, to be connected to God, we have to become like Him. In the spiritual realm, connection and disconnection are not a matter of time and space, but of similarity or difference of form. Therefore, to the degree that our essence is the same as God's, we are connected to Him. And this is probably one of the most important concepts. We talk about becoming God. It's very simple. The Creator is not in a place or of a body where we need to come close to Him. He is an essence. If we want to come to Him and be with Him, and meaning to be with all that unending joy and fulfillment, we need to be like Him. And it's simple. To the degree that we are like the Creator, to that degree we have joy, fulfillment, and life. To the degree we are disconnected from the Creator, we do not have that, and we have darkness. There is one of the things about that this hopefully clarifies, is that there aren't two ways about it. We are the connected, and to the degree we are connected to the light of the Creator, we are connected to fulfillment and joy and happiness and life. And to the degree we are not connected to the Creator, we are disconnected from light and life and joy. God, number 3, God's form, his essence, is pure sharing. Thus, for our essence to become as his, we must become beings of sharing. When we do this, we move closer to God and are more connected to him. One thing, again, that of course most of us know, there's only one aspect to the essence of the Creator, and that is that he is sharing. The one thing we know for certain about the Creator, and nothing else, is that he has pure light and energy of sharing. The opposite of God's essence is the ego. What the Kabbalists call the desire to receive for the self alone, me, 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 that is the opposite of the Creator. There are two forces in this world. There's the Creator and there's darkness. There is sharing and there is taking. There is light and there is ego. No two ways. And to the degree we're connected to the right, to the Creator, by being like him, to that degree we're connected to light and life and happiness. And to the degree we're disconnected, to the degree we're connected to our ego, to our selfish desire to receive for the self alone, to that degree we're connected to darkness and death and pain and suffering. It's that clear and that simple. To the degree, as number 5 says, to the degree that we are connected to the ego, we are connected to pain, suffering, and death. And this, one of those things that the Kabbalists teach is the falsehood of cause and effect, or the problem that are caused to us because of cause and effect. In order to give us free will, and I'm sure all of us have learned about the necessity for free will, the cause and effect in this world is not clear. There is time allowed between cause and effect, between a selfish action and a feeling of disconnect, between a positive action and a feeling of connection. But for us it's important to know, at least in our consciousness, the clarity and the difference between connection and disconnection. Our goal is to destroy our connection with the ego and strengthen our connection with God. We connect to and become God through transformational sharing and destruction of the ego. This is one of those concepts, and sometimes when I talk about this, I'd rather people not have learned about this before, because one of the greatest tricks that the negative side has is by allowing us to assimilate new information with old and making it a salad and not pushing us anywhere. And one of the things that I hope to accomplish, is a very clear test of whether this is really clear in our mind. How many of us have acted with our ego today? Okay. Well, that means, and myself included, is that this is not clear enough to us. This is not clear enough to us, because if the two forces are clear, and this is all there is to it. Of course, the tools that we need to use to help us accomplish this. But the clarity needs to be more than anything else. And I hope we're clear that we do not have the clarity. Because those of us who think we understand this, and it's not, understand, I don't mean understanding, I mean truly internalizing this, we could not be negative. We could not be acting with our ego. So what we need to do, one of those things, whether you put this on your refrigerator, whether you read it every day or 10 times a day, the clarity of our purpose. There are two paths in this world, and we're on two opposite sides. There is light and life and blessings and joy on the one hand. 100% of it, not 90% and not 60% and not 30%, 100% on this side. And on this side, there is darkness, there is death, there is pain, there is suffering. And we're somewhere in the middle there on this continuum. And we decide which way we're going. If this becomes clear in our mind, we'd have to be idiots, as unfortunately we all are to a certain extent, to act with our ego. And what we need to do, and this is what I'm talking about, constant consciousness. Today's over, tomorrow or tonight and tomorrow, I'm about to act in an egotistical way, in a selfish way, in a desire to receive for the self-alone way. Simple thing I need to tell myself. And I try to do this, and this is one of those things that you can't accomplish in 1 day or 2 days or 10 days or months. And one of the things that I hope is clear is, and because we have to start where we are. And where we are, and this needs to be our understanding, we do not have this clarity. We are not aware that every single time I am acting with my ego, I am moving myself one step closer to pain, suffering, and death. And that every time I do an action, a positive action of sharing, of destroying my ego, and this is one of the important concepts of becoming God, destroying our ego. Destroying our ego, not making it a little bit less, sharing more. Kabbalah, and I'm assuming all of us know this by now, is not about being altruistic. It's about being selfish in the best way. Because what Kabbalah teaches, the reason I want to share, and the reason I want to destroy my ego, the reason I want people to embarrass me so that my ego gets completely destroyed, is not because I'm a good guy or I'm a spiritual guy or I'm a sharing person. Simply because I'm selfish. And I know that I have two paths, two sides that I'm bringing myself towards. And if I act in a way of selfishness and ego, me, I'm simply day by day and minute by minute, hour by hour, moving myself closer to pain, suffering, and death. And if I am constantly thinking of ways to destroy my ego, to do positive actions of sharing, not because I love everybody so much, but because I know that by doing so, I bring myself closer to the light of the Creator, to light and fulfillment and blessings, and life, and maybe as the Kabbalists taught for thousands of years, eternal life. And this is one of the most important concepts. One of the things that I find unbelievable maybe is that there are billions of people in the world who believe one of the two, and there are obviously more Christians than Jews, but the Judeo-Christian tradition. There are billions of people who believe in the Judeo-Christian tradition. But if you ask most people, do you believe that death can stop, that there can be an end to death? I think, how many people here really believe that death can be stopped? There could be an end to death? Really believe? More than I expected. Now, of course, and we'll talk about this a little later, there's difference between real believing and, one of those things, when we talk about, and this is a little bit off the topic, we talk about miracles. One of the important concepts that the Kabbalists teach is that there are no miracles. And by that they mean that things that you will be surprised at cannot happen. So those of us who at least say we believe that death can be stopped, if it happened tomorrow, is there anybody who wouldn't be surprised? I think we'd all be surprised. And what that means is that our consciousness of it is different. But we'll get to that later. But in the Bible it says, the Creator says, Bila hamavet lanetzach. There will come a time when death will be removed. And one of the things that I find sort of fascinating is that even people who believe, there are people who do not believe, and that's a different discussion, but there are even people who believe in the Judeo-Christian tradition do not think about, at least, what it says clearly in the Bible. But let's talk about logic, not what God promises in the Bible. If we understand this concept, that on one side there is light and life and blessings in the Creator, and on the other there is darkness and pain and suffering, and that we have the ability to not simply move closer to one or to the other, but to really, absolutely connect 100% to one side, and that one side we're talking about right now is to the Creator, well then it's possible and logical that we will be connected to removal of death. And this is one of the most important concepts. What is death? Death is a complete connection to the desire to receive for the self alone. As the Zohar stated thousands of years ago, what happens throughout our lives is that, and again, this is all based on this logic, clarity of logic. Every time we do an action of desire to receive for the self alone, of the ego, we build our ego up. It's not really our ego, but we'll get to that later. We build the ego up and we build our desire to receive for the self alone. We incrementally add stronger and stronger and stronger connection to the darkness, and stronger disconnection from the light of the Creator. And this goes out on, unfortunately, for most of us throughout our lives. And it keeps on going, and we get stronger and stronger connection to the desire to receive for the self alone, to the darkness. And when a person achieves a critical mass of ego, of desire to receive for the self alone, of disconnection from the light of the Creator, that's death. So death is not something that happens, it's something that we bring about. And we bring about it by one simple way, by constantly, consistently, day in and day out, acting with the ego and disconnecting ourselves from the light of the Creator and connecting ourselves with that darkness. And when a person achieves that critical mass of disconnect, of connection to desire to receive for the self alone, he's accomplished death. The positive side, of course, is that we have the ability, and again, and one of the things I want to stress is that this is the most difficult thing we can ever accomplish. But it's possible. It's possible. With effort and consciousness and focus, constant focus, a person, if we, through actions, positive actions of transformational sharing, positive actions of destroying, consciously destroying our ego, connect And of course, it's a process. Connect 100% to the Creator, become God, become inseparable from the light of the Creator. That light, that life is unending. It's possible. God promised it thousands of years ago. Hopefully we begin to understand it. Most of us can't really understand it in our consciousness, and we'll get to that. But at least the logic. Let's start with the logic. And if you want to at least begin the process, get the clarity. The clarity of these two paths. And again, every single time you're about to do a positive action, think. And this needs to change. And one of the things about becoming God, it's not simply about doing different things than we're doing now, but doing everything that we're doing now of a positive nature and even of a negative nature with consciousness. Many of us read Zohar, many of us connect to the Shabbat, many of us share, many of us do positive actions. But why are we doing it? Doing a positive action without the right consciousness is, I don't want to say as bad, but as big a missed opportunity as not doing a positive action at all. Before we're about to do any positive action, we need to think, why am I sharing with this person? Why am I connecting to the Zohar? Why am I connecting to Shabbat? Why am I using any of the spiritual tools? One simple reason. It needs to be this simple. It needs to be this clear. One reason. Because I know this is bringing me one step closer to the Creator. One step closer to blessings. One step closer to light. One step closer, maybe if I even believe it, to removal of death. Every action, a positive one that I do, needs to be with this consciousness. Because one of the most important lessons the Zohar teaches is that consciousness is the light. To the degree we have the consciousness in our action, that's the type of light we're going to reveal. So if I share all day and all night, and even if we're talking about transformational sharing, but my consciousness isn't clear, and my consciousness isn't there, we're missing tremendous opportunities. We're talking on the positive side now, and that's what we need to change is what we're thinking about when we're doing positive actions. And again, one of the things I hope we're all thinking about as we hear this is we all do actions, positive actions, actions of connection to the light of the Creator. But how many of them are with this consciousness? How many of them are with this consciousness? I am doing this because I know it's bringing me one step closer to a connection to the light of the Creator. One step closer to blessings and light and fulfillment and maybe even ultimate life. This needs to be our consciousness on the positive side. On the negative side, even when we do a negative action, even if it's after the fact, to remind ourselves, because again, it's a struggle and we'll get to the depth of the struggle. It's a struggle. But before, and if we can't accomplish it before, after, think, why don't I want to scream at that person or take that for myself alone or yell at some guy who cut me off? Not because I want to be a spiritual person or a good person. That's nice. But because I know that when this guy cut me off and I yell at him, what I'm doing is taking myself one step closer to pain, suffering, and death. When I have a decision to make to hurt another person and better myself, the reason I'm not going to do that is not because I care so much about the other person, but because I care so much about myself. And this is one of the concepts that needs to be clear. We are literally committing suicide. We are literally bringing ourselves to pain, suffering, and death. Nothing around us is doing this. And whether we've started it in previous incarnations or have started it this incarnation makes no difference. But the process needs to be clear. And even if we've done it, to think back, why don't I want to do it? Why do I want to do whatever I can to destroy my ego? Because I know that by doing that, by disconnecting myself from that tether to the darkness, I remove myself from pain and suffering. When I feel negativity, when I feel pain, when I feel any type of suffering, one thought I need to have. The reason why this is happening to me, smaller or greater, is one simple reason. Because I have accomplished a connection to the darkness through ego, through desire to receive for the self alone. I have not connected enough to the Creator through sharing, through destruction of the ego. That needs to be our consciousness, a clarity of the logic, and a constant consciousness of every action that we do. Tonight when you go home, maybe somebody asks you to do something, maybe you're trying to decide whether you have enough time to read the Zohar and connect to light. There's one reason why you should do it. One reason. Not because it's positive or it's a good thing, it's good for the other person. Because I want to take so many steps closer to the light. I want to take so many steps closer to blessings. It's one of these things, clarity. Clarity of this logic, clarity of what it means in our life. And this changes, hopefully. If we really get it, I'm trying to remember, every once in a while you get these ideas and you get it deeper and deeper and deeper. It's one of those concepts that you really begin to taste, to feel the power of this lesson. That we change literally the way we look at everything. I can use my examples at home. I assume I think my wife would vouch for this. I'm a pretty good husband. But the reason why very often I will do things, and especially when they're uncomfortable, and we'll get into that maybe tonight or maybe next week. The reason why I want to do things when they're uncomfortable is not because of the love that I feel for my wife sometimes, because if it's 2:00 in the morning and there's something that needs to be done, and I do it, maybe my being a good person isn't enough to push me. But being connected to light and life and blessings is certainly the biggest push possible. And what, again, you can say it only so many times. And this is, now it's in all of our hands, in my hands as well as your hands. Understanding the logic is the first step. And what I would ask, please, is do not take it as understood from now, because there is no way, I'm telling you, I don't understand it enough. There's no way any of us really understands this enough now. And we either take it seriously or we don't. But if we want to take it seriously, and again, one of these things, I can't tell you how excited I am about this concept, because when you look at the world today, there's so much pain, so much darkness. If all of us became good people, we couldn't. If millions of us became good people, I don't know if that would be enough to outweigh the darkness in this world. But that's only if we become good people. But if we become God, and what that means, we can't even begin, but hopefully we have some vision of the type of light that can reveal, the type of change that could bring to the world. If enough of us, that's one of the Zohar in Noach speaks about this idea that if one community of people were completely connected to the light of the Creator, they can change the world. I never understood that section in the Zohar, but now I do. Because, and again, if this is not clear, please ask, because this is one of the things that needs to be clear. If everybody in this room, me included, became God, really took this concept seriously, understood the logic, and applied it day in and day out, the type of change that only simply us in this room would accomplish is something we can't begin to understand, and hopefully maybe a little bit now. Because we're not simply talking about revealing a little bit more light. Sometimes in the movies you see, I don't know which movie I'm referring to right now, but there's darkness and suddenly there's a huge, whether it's a huge cloud of light that is revealed. That's what each one of us can do. Everything, the blessings that the Creator can send down to this world, every single one of us has that potential. Every single one of us. So when we talk about the importance of understanding this logic and literally applying it in our lives, it's not because we're going to become better people and make the world a little bit better. The type of light that can radiate from every single one of us, the type of light that we can reveal in this world, I am certain that if everyone in this room, and again, myself included, took this seriously enough and became God, the world would change, unimaginably. And that's why, when we talk about, very often when we decide what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, hopefully when we see the potential, we see the potential of what can be accomplished. And what it needs to start with the logic. And, as I said earlier, very often I see different people at different stages of the spiritual development, myself included. And what separates people who are going to make it, hopefully, and those who are going to just stay spiritual, which is always nice, is a clarity of purpose, clarity of the logic, and applying it every single day. And one of the things, one of the great Kabbalist Rav Ashlag said that the greatest pain that he felt in life wasn't from people who were never spiritual, because, what can you expect? He said, but from people who began the spiritual path, began the spiritual journey, and did not finish it. And as he said, out of 1,000, maybe one. And what he meant is about this concept of becoming God, because so many of us come through the center, and we become a little bit more spiritual, and we reveal a little bit more light. But to become this constant connection, truly becoming God, not enough. And the change that we can bring to this world, every single one of us, this needs to become tangible. I want to be able to, if I see a sick person, heal them. I want to be able to, if I see somebody who needs blessing, to give them a blessing to really help them. And I know that I can. And I know that it depends on this. It depends on me day in and day out, fighting with the negative side, destroying my ego, sharing when I can with this consciousness, with this consciousness. And again, as Rav Ashlag said, we need to go over this again and again and again and again until it's in our box. Until it's so clear that every action that we do, we're delineating it to one of these two. We are either taking steps forward, closer to the light of the Creator, or taking them further away from the Creator. But again, clarity of purpose, clear understanding of the logic, applying it in our lives with a consciousness. With a consciousness. When we talk about consciousness, it's one of these concepts when we talk about, as the Bible speaks of, removal of death. It's one of those concepts that we can't really understand. And why? Why can't we understand? We talk about connection and disconnection from the Creator. There is connection and disconnection of consciousness. What does that mean? Our consciousness, and I'm going to use a hard word, is so polluted and dirty with desire to receive for the self alone, we can't think clearly. And this is one of, when we talk about it, and we'll go through the different aspects of this. But our consciousness, our mind, is disconnected from the Creator. When we act in a desire to receive for the self alone way, one of the things that we do is build layers and layers and barriers of darkness on our mind. Our mind has been trained by us, unfortunately, to be disconnected from the Creator. And therefore, our mind that is disconnected from the Creator is limited in what it can understand. And one of the things that I've noticed, again, difference between people who are really transforming and those who are not, is that the more we are transforming, and that means now we understand clearly, the more we come closer to the Creator, the more we're becoming God, the bigger picture we see, the more we can understand. The reason why our consciousness is clouded and filthy and dark, at times at least, is because of our actions of disconnection from the light of the Creator. When we disconnect from the light of the Creator, we're disconnecting our body, we're disconnecting our soul, and we're disconnecting our mind. On whatever step we are on that continuum, between connection to the light of the Creator and disconnection to the light of the Creator, our consciousnness is as well. And one of the things we need to accomplish by becoming God is cleaning up our mind, cleaning up our consciousness. And until we do that, we talk about certainty, we talk about understanding. None of that is really possible to the degree that a connection to the degree that we are disconnected from the Creator. And it's one of the most important concepts. Again, it's a beautiful thing sometimes you see. A person starts off the process, and hopefully, a person who's really on the path, and you see that their horizons open up, their consciousness opens up. I can say this about myself, that I thankfully have had the blessing of being in this teaching for a long time. But I even see for myself that the consciousness, truth, and understanding of these concepts grows as we connect to the Creator. Because consciousness is linked to the Creator. To the degree we are connected to the Creator, our consciousness is of the Creator. We have the Creator's thoughts. To the degree we are of the desire to receive for the self alone, of ego nature, our mind is of ego nature. Our mind is disconnected from the Creator. Our thoughts are therefore not the thoughts of the Creator. And one of the beautiful things about becoming God, can you imagine, and hopefully we all do and hope for, if every thought that we had was a thought of the Creator, if everything that we desired to do, everything that came into our mind was of the Creator, that's what we can accomplish. It's important that we understand, though, that to the degree we are disconnected from the light of the Creator, our consciousness is disconnected. To the degree we are disconnected from the Creator, we have a problem. We have the inability to really grasp these concepts, to really see the bigger picture. There's a story in the Bible, in Kings, in Melachim. It's a really beautiful story. It's one of those stories, and I like stories, when you look at them on the face value, you really don't understand them. And then when you understand them, you really understand them. The story is about the prophet Elisha. And the prophet Elisha, those of you who know a little bit more about him, he was a prophet at the time of the kings, and he, of course, could prophesy and give blessings. And there was this woman, and we don't even know her name, we know the town that she was from. She was from the town of Shunem. And every time that Elisha would go by, she would see that he had nowhere to stay. So she decided with her husband to build in their attic a place for the prophet to stay. They built him a nice place with a bed and a candelabra and a table to eat on. And every time that Elisha the prophet would come by Shunem, he would stay in that attic. And this went on for some time, and Elisha was speaking to his apprentice, his name was Gehazi, and he asked his apprentice, he says, what is there that we can do for this woman, for this kind woman who's sharing so much with us? And Gehazi tells his master, the prophet Elisha, he says, this woman doesn't have any children. Her and her husband don't have any children. Maybe you can bless them to have a child. So the prophet calls the woman to his room, and she says, I've heard that you don't have any children. You've shared so much with us. I want to bless you to have a child. And the woman and her husband were old already at this time. And she says to him, please, don't make a fool of me. She says, I know it's not going to happen. Don't waste your blessings. He says, I promise you, next year at this time, you will have a child. So, of course, as the prophet promised, she becomes pregnant and she has a son. The son grows up, he's maybe 12 or 13 years old, and he goes out with his father to the fields, to work the fields. And he's out there all day, he doesn't drink, and the sun was beating down on him, it was very hot, and he faints in the fields. And one of the people working with the father takes the child home to his mother, and the mother holds on to her child, and towards the evening the child dies. The woman takes the child, she puts him up in the attic, in the bed of Elisha the prophet. And she gets on, she asks her husband, give me a donkey so I can go. She gets on the donkey, she sees her husband, the husband says, where are you going? And she says, no, I'm just going to go see the prophet. One of the things that always bothered me about this story, why doesn't she tell her husband that their son has just died? But she doesn't. She says, I'm going to go see the prophet. She gets on her donkey, she travels to Elisha. And she comes to Elisha and she tells him, he said, I told you not to make a fool of me. She tells the prophet, the child you promised me has died. It would better that he would never have been born. And Elisha says to his apprentice, he says, for whatever reason, God had not let me see, but I know that I have the ability to do something. And he takes his cane. He takes his cane and he gives it to his apprentice Gehazi. And he says, take this cane and put it on the child and revive him. He tells his apprentice Gehazi, he says, but make sure on your way, on your path, as you're going to the child, don't talk to anybody. Just walk, don't talk, and go to the child. The apprentice takes the stick, he puts it on the child, and nothing happens. The apprentice comes back to the prophet Elisha, and he says, I did as you told me to, and nothing happened. And again, a question that I always had in reading this story, why didn't it happen? We know that the prophet simply didn't just do things. These were messages from the Creator, from God, that told him to do this. Well, if it was a message from God, why didn't it work? But it didn't. And the prophet Elisha then goes to the house of the woman of Shunem. He goes up to the attic, as the prophet tells us. He lies down on the child, and he warms the child's body up. He gets up and he walks around the room, lies down on him again 7 times. And by the 7th time, the child is revived. The prophet calls the mother. What a dramatic, beautiful story. Resurrection of the dead, for those of us who believe. But 2 questions that always bothered me about the story. The child has just died. The mother asks the husband for a donkey to go see the prophet. What wife, what mother wouldn't tell their husband that their child had just died? Number 1. Number 2, why didn't Gehazi, the apprentice, accomplish the mission that God through the prophet told him to do? He gave him the cane, he gave him the stick, he told him that just simply put the cane and the stick on the child and revive him. And the Kabbalists explained that what happened was that Gehazi did not listen to Elisha. On his way to the child, he was telling everybody what he's about to accomplish. And of course he was happy. Can you imagine? He believed in the prophet, he believed in the word of God. He knew that he was going to accomplish what was promised. And he's telling everybody. And you know what? Everybody was excited. Can you imagine he's about to go revive the dead? Everybody would love to believe it. And the lesson is about consciousness. Whether we believe in resurrection of the dead, or whether we simply understand the concept of consciousness. Consciousness is one of the most powerful tools. Whatever is not in our consciousness will not be accomplished by us. It's as simple as that. Whatever we do not truly have certainty that we can accomplish, we will not accomplish. Worse than that, or further, external consciousness influences us. The mother the woman of Shunem, she knew and she believed with certainty that the prophet can revive her child. She also knew that her husband's consciousness was not as strong as hers. What father wouldn't want his son to be revived? Certainly her husband would have prayed and loved for it to happen, but he wouldn't have had the certainty. And that lack of certainty from a husband would have made it so that the child would have never been revived. When Gehazi, the apprentice of Elisha, was walking to the child, and he's telling everybody the wonderful news from the prophet, the wonderful miracle he's about to accomplish, they all would have loved for it to happen. They were all excited for it to happen. But their consciousness wasn't there. And their lack of consciousness, their lack of certainty made it so that Gehazi could not do what could have been done. And this is the lesson about consciousness. One of the reasons, and it's one of those, parallel paths. Our consciousness of becoming God cannot possibly be as strong as it needs to be because our consciousness is disconnected from God. The only way we can accomplish connection to God is by consciousness. So one of the reasons, one of the needs that we have to connect to God is to connect to God consciousness. And we grow with it. And this is one of the things, first of all, to understand the importance of consciousness, to understand our lack of consciousness, and to understand that as we get closer through our actions, through our ceaseless actions, constant actions of destroying of the ego and connection to the light of the Creator, our consciousness will grow. And as our consciousness grows, our potential will grow. Because to whatever degree our consciousness is lacking, we cannot accomplish. The things that we have certainty about, we can accomplish. Things that we do not have certainty about, we cannot accomplish. This brings us to the idea of our potential, and we've been talking about it throughout, but now that hopefully we have the clarity of the logic, we have the clarity of understanding, we can begin to understand what it is that we can accomplish. And what this means, when we talk about becoming God, we have to understand how complete this is. Our body, and this is one of the things we talked about consciousness before, it's important to understand this about our body. Our body is diffused with ego, with the darkness that our ego does. Our hands can be so much more powerful. Our feet can be so much more powerful. Our eyes, it says about Moses, that he could bless simply by looking at people. He could bless them with his eyes. Every single one of us has that ability to literally make our body, our consciousness, our soul like the Creator, with the ability of doing of the Creator. But that is only if we move towards the Creator. I'd like to share a story. This is a story about the great Kabbalist. It was called the Apter Rebbe. And the story is that he had a very close student who was a very wealthy man. And whenever somebody would come to the Kabbalist, to the Apter Rebbe, and would ask him for assistance, he would always send him to this close student who was wealthy, and he would always help them out. Literally every single person who had money trouble, this needed money for the doctors, whatever it needed money for, he would send him to this student, and the student always helped. And this went on for years. Once, a certain person comes to the Apter Rebbe and he says, I need your assistance. He says, go to my student. He says, he'll help you out. He always does. He goes to the student who was wealthy, but unfortunately was having a little bit cash flow problems. And he says to the other student, he says, I'd love to help you, and I always try to help people who my master sends to me. But right now, I just can't. I just don't have the money to give you. Maybe come back in a few months when it'll be easier for me, but I really can't help you now. And the man comes back to the master, the Kabbalist, and he says, the student you sent me to didn't want to help me. He says, you know what? I have another student who I can send you to. The poor man starts becoming wealthy. And after maybe a year or two, the once wealthy man is almost completely penniless at this point. He comes to his master, to the Apter Rebbe, and he says, I'm looking back at my life and what I've done and what I didn't do, and I realize that it was at that point when you sent that person to me, and I didn't help him, that my fortunes were completely turned around. And I see that the student who did assist, his fortunes turned completely the other way. Obviously, I lost my blessings. Obviously, I lost my money because I'm not listening to you. So the master tells him, he says, you completely don't understand. He said, before I was about to come down to this world, the Creator saw my soul. He knew the potential that I had, what I can do in this world. And he said, you know what? I want to give you a lot of money. because I know the type of person you're going to be. I want to give you a lot of money so you can help others with it. And my soul, I said to the Creator, I said, you know what? If you give me all this money, I'm going to be busy with it, investing, worrying about it. I have a better idea, I told God. He says, take my money and give it to somebody who will be close to me, somebody who will do with it as I want. He says, and that'll be easier for me. I don't have to worry about it, and I can do with it as I want. You were chosen, you were close to me, so the Creator chose you to be that person who will hold on to my money. He said, as long as you were doing with my money what I wanted done with it, you could hold on to it. But once you stop doing with my money what I wanted done with it, then God had to give it to somebody else who will allow me to do with my money what I want done with it. What's the lesson? Everything that we have, simple ability to see, simple ability to hear, simple ability to think, simple ability to use our body, all those are gifts from the Creator. And the reason we have them is because, to whatever minute or greater degree, we are connected to the Creator. But all of those body parts, our consciousness, our soul, all have the potential to grow exponentially. But it's simple, just as with the Apter Rebbe. None of this is ours. None of this is ours. None of our mind is ours. None of our soul is really ours. It's simply light of the Creator. To the degree that we use it in the way that the Creator wants us to the degree we use it in the way that He's given us to do it, the powers will grow. We'll be able to heal with our hands and bless with our eyes and think correctly with our mind and pray powerfully with our mouth and reveal tremendous light with our soul. It's that simple. To the degree we get closer and take the steps one after the other to the light of the Creator, to that degree everything about us grows. The power of everything about us grows. To the degree that we move away from the light of the Creator, everything about us diminishes. And that clarity needs to be, there. That everything about us is so much less than it really can be. And I'd like to end with the story this is from a Kabbalist not that long ago, but one of the ideas of understanding our potential. Because one of the greatest, and we'll talk about this next week, but one of the greatest tricks that the negative side has done to us is completely diminish our understanding of our potential. If any of us had an inkling of what we can accomplish, there's no way we'd be living our lives the way we are. But the reason we do, and the reason we allow ourselves to fall so short, is simply because we don't have a constant consciousness of our potential. And the story is about a great Kabbalist who had many students and wrote many books. And once at one of the meals, every time he printed a new book, they had a party, a get-together, celebrating that revelation of light. And at one of them, he told this story. He says, when I was 11 years old, I was not a very good student. I used to, play around in school, never studied. And I heard one night, I hear my mother crying to my father. And she said, what are we going to do with our son? He doesn't want to study. All he wants to do is play. He almost never goes to school. And when he does, he's simply disruptive. What are we going to do? So I hear my mother, and literally she was crying. And I realized for the first time the type of pain that I was causing her. So I literally changed my course from then on. I invested myself in my studies. And as you can tell, so many years later, I've become wise. I've become a leader. And I've written books. And I've taught thousands of people. He says, that's a great story, but that's not what I want to tell you. He says, imagine what would have happened. Imagine what would have happened if I did not hear my mother that night. And I would have lived my life, I know myself by nature, I'm a good person. I would have grown up, not been very smart, maybe know to read a little bit, enough for the prayers maybe. I would have been a nice person. I would have been a really nice and spiritual person. I would share, I would pray, I would study. I would be, anybody looking at me, this is such a, as all of us, such a good person, a nice person, a spiritual person. He says, imagine if I would have done that with my life. I would have been a really nice person, spiritual and sharing. After I would leave this world, I would come up to the heavenly court. And this, by the way, the Kabbalists say is the greatest pain that we have when unfortunately, if it's too late and we realize what we could have accomplished. But I would have come up there. And the Creator would have said to me, he says, where are all of your books that you should have written? And I'd look at the Creator, of course, being the Creator, I couldn't say that he went crazy. But I'd look at him and say, what do you mean books? I could hardly read. What do you expect me to write books? But he would have. Can you imagine? And then he would say to me, where are your thousands of students? And once again, I'd look at him, a little concerned. And I'd say, thousands of students, thankful, I was a good person, I was nice, and I helped people here and there, and I gave money to charity, and I was spiritual, and I prayed, and I meditated. But thousands of students, I couldn't teach anybody, couldn't even teach my son. I had to rent a teacher for him. I couldn't teach thousands of people, but you know what? They would have expected that of me. And this is what he wanted to teach, and hopefully what we begin to understand. The potential that we have, and what we have to realize is, we're not talking about judging, but talking about the way we sort of look at our lives and how we allow ourselves to fall so short. We have no idea of what we can accomplish. And every single one of us, myself included, if we look back in our lives and we haven't taught thousands of people, we haven't touched and blessed and give blessings to and teachings to thousands of people, you know what? Chances are 99% of us could have and should have and would have. And you know what? Probably not thousands, tens of thousands. Because if we really begin to become God, really begin this process, the type of things that we can accomplish, the type of light and blessings and teachings and wisdom that we can give to others is unimaginable. Let's hope for every single one of us that we take this seriously enough, not simply as being a little bit more spiritual, doing a little bit more actions of sharing, acting a little bit less with ego, to take this seriously enough to understand that everything about our lives falls so much short of what we can accomplish, because we are so barriered. There's so much around us disconnecting us from the Creator. If we move closer and break down the barrier of the ego, break down the desire to receive for the self alone, and move closer and closer, we cannot begin to understand, appreciate what we can accomplish. And hopefully, my hope for this seminar, for the book, and for this concept is that none of us become more spiritual people. That's not the goal. The goal is to really become God, to really begin to realize the unbelievable potential that none of us are even scratching the surface of. Thank you. Good night. We spoke about becoming God, and what that means is a complete transformation from the nature that we are born with, which is a nature of ego, to a nature that is more and exactly actually like God's, a nature of sharing. And we spoke about the fact that the only way we can achieve true lasting fulfillment is by accomplishing that transformation, by completing that transformation. We spoke about the logic of change. We spoke about how important it is to understand the process and the need for the transformation. What separates a person who's truly spiritual and truly on the path towards becoming God and a person who is not is a lack of clarity about the logic of the process and a lack of focus and concentration on the logic. And therefore, it's important for us not only to know the logic that we studied last week, but to remember it and to focus our lives based on that information. What I'd like to cover this week is some of the tools that we need to use, understandings we need to have, and tools that we need to use to accomplish this transformation of becoming God. The first and most important aspect of true spiritual work that has the potential to bring us to become God and truly achieve the potential that each one of us has within ourselves is that our spiritual work needs to be uncomfortable. Very often when people become involved in spirituality, it's because they want to make their lives more comfortable. There are problems that they have, there are different areas in their lives that they'd like to make better, and that of course is good. But it's important that we realize that we're not talking about simply making the life that I have now a little bit better, alleviating a little bit of the pain and suffering that I have. We're talking about a complete solution, one that lasts forever. And the only way our spiritual work can bring us to that point, the only way our spiritual work can bring us to becoming God is if our work is uncomfortable. Why? It's important again, it's always important that we understand the logic. Why is it important? If we want to become God, that our spiritual work is uncomfortable. We explained last week that there are two energies, there are two forces. There is the light of the Creator, and there is darkness. There is lack of the light of the Creator. Sharing, destroying of the ego connects us to the Creator. Receiving for oneself alone, ego, connects us to that darkness that is not the light of the Creator. Everything that is within our natural nature, everything that is within our comfort zone, is really to some extent or another part of the ego, part of the desire to receive for the self alone. We are in a box. What do we want to accomplish? We don't want to just simply be spiritual. We want to achieve a transformation. That transformation is beyond that box, beyond the box of the ego, beyond the box of comfortability. Because everything that we find comfortable to one extent or the other connects us to the ego. And if we want to break beyond that box, connect completely to the light of the Creator, our spiritual work needs to be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable means somebody's done something negative to me. Now, I want to share. A person who's spiritual will more often than not share with somebody who he likes, who he enjoys sharing to, he enjoys giving to. Of course, that's all good to give to other people, but it's not transformational. It's not going beyond the ego. The ego is just as satisfied when you're sharing to a friend. But when you're sharing to somebody who you don't want to share, for instance, when you're doing an action that is beyond your comfort, that goes against what your nature tells you to do, then you're breaking the ego. Then you're moving one step closer to becoming God. And everything, it's one of the most important understandings that we need to have if we truly want to become God. That our spiritual work should not be comfortable. Certainly there are things that we do on a consistent basis that aren't necessarily uncomfortable, and they're all there to give us the energy, the ability, the light to do our true spiritual work. But true spiritual work needs to be uncomfortable. And again, it's important that we understand why. Because if we want to not simply be spiritual, be a good person, but if we want to truly become God, if we want to truly achieve the potential and reveal the potential that each one of us has within us, we need to go beyond the box of our ego, beyond the barrier of our comfortable zone, the desire to receive for the self alone. And every action that we can do, that is a spiritual action that we can do, a sharing action that we can do, that is uncomfortable, breaks the barrier of the ego, connects us that much closer to the light of the Creator. And again, I'll give a few examples, which is pretty simple, but it's important that we get the clarity on this. Most of us know how important it is to connect to the Zohar. We read, we scan, we study the Zohar. We know that it connects us to the light of the Creator. When do we do that? I'm sure all of us have different times during the day when it's easy for us to do it. What about on a day that we've worked terribly hard, we have so much aggravation, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and we want to go to sleep. There's other things that we want to do. We want to unwind. It's not so easy for us now to take 5, 10, 20 minutes to connect to the Zohar. But you know what? When you do that, the light that you reveal is much stronger and greater than if you connect to the Zohar for 3 hours when it's comfortable for you. We know we meditate, we use the meditations and the prayers that we do, actions of sharing like I mentioned before. Of course, as we consistently develop spiritually, we're always doing things that are also comfortable. But it's important that we never forget the goal. And if the goal is to become God, then the way to achieve that is by uncomfortable spiritual work. Because it is that uncomfortability which goes against our ego, which goes against our desire to receive for the self alone, that can truly bring us to becoming God. Anything else that is comfortable, everything else that is uncomfortable, if our spiritual work is focused still on remaining comfortable, we will not be able to achieve that connection to God, the idea of becoming God. One way to understand it, if you look at, there's 2 great mountains. We're on one of them, and that one is the desire to receive for the self alone, the ego. And most of us, as we begin our spiritual path, we reach over above the ravine to the other mountain, which is God, and draw some light back into our side, which is the ego side, the desire to receive for the self alone side. And that works, at least for a while, or maybe a long while, because the light of the Creator is truly powerful and strong. And even if we just, go a little bit across and bring some of the light back to where we are, the light will shine there. But that cannot bring us to the ultimate goal. It can give us a little bit more light, a little bit more fulfillment. But complete fulfillment, complete removal of pain and suffering can only happen as we go to the other side. And that other side has to pass through breaking of the barrier of the ego, breaking the barrier that brings us, that keeps us in our comfort zone. And that type of spiritual work is the only type of work that can bring us to becoming God, that can bring us to achieving our true potential and therefore ultimate fulfillment. So when we talk about one question we need to constantly ask ourselves, and this I hope is a little bit different than what we usually ask ourselves. If we want to know if I am connecting to God, if I am coming closer to God, if I'm coming closer to achieving my potential, the question that I need to ask myself, that we need to ask ourselves, isn't am I doing A, B, C, D? Am I meditating? Am I connecting to the Zohar? Am I sharing? That's not the question. The question needs to be, am I doing what is uncomfortable for me? Am I sharing when it is uncomfortable? Am I praying when it is uncomfortable? Am I connecting when it is uncomfortable? If the answer only and when the answer to that question is yes, are we on the path to becoming God? There's a story that I'd like to share with you that speaks of this idea and hopefully sharpens this idea. There was a great Kabbalist who was traveling through a certain town. And as he goes through the main street of the town, he smells, as great Kabbalists can, they smell not simply our world, but spiritual energy. And he's going through the town and he smells a beautiful smell, and he stops the carriage that he's on, and he goes up to the apartment complex where the house where the smell is emanating from. And he knocks on the door, and a man answers the door, and he's surprised to see this relatively famous and great Kabbalist at his door, and he's so excited. He says, "Please come in." And he says, "Anything I can get you, food or drink?" And the Kabbalist says, "No, I have to tell you the truth. The reason I'm here is there's a very unique and strong and beautiful smell coming from your house. I'd like to know what it's from." The man looks at him. He's not really sure what he's talking about. He says, "Where? Show me," he tells the Kabbalist. And the Kabbalist starts walking through the house, and he's smelling, goes from one room to the other room, and he keeps on smelling. And he walks into the man's bedroom, and the smell is getting stronger. And he walks up to the closet, and he opens up the closet. And he goes to the back of the closet, and he sees on the corner there's a clown suit that's crumpled up in the corner. And he takes it out, and he smells it. And he says, "The smell is emanating from here. There must be a story. Tell me the story of this clown suit." And the guy is red in the face. He's embarrassed. He begins stuttering. He says, "I have to tell you that, this is one of the stories that I had hoped never to have to retell. It's one of the most embarrassing things that has ever happened to me." So the Kabbalist says, "Please tell me the story." And he tells him the following story. He said, I'm in this town, I am the person who collects money for people in need. Anybody who is in need, who needs assistance, monetary assistance or other, comes to me, and I try to find a way to help them. One day, after a very long week and difficult week of helping people, a man comes to me, and he tells me his story that him and his family are basically starving. They need for the weekend, for the Shabbat, if they have any hope to connect to it and have any food on the Shabbat, they need some money. And besides that, he tells me they have no money, and their daughter is about to get married, and it would be helpful if he can also at least begin and start the process of arranging for the money to pay for the wedding. This man is completely broken, completely bankrupt. And I look at him, the man tells the Kabbalist, and I know that I've gone to everybody who's ever helped me before and shared with me to share with others, and there's nobody I can go to, and I'm not sure what to do. I say, "You know what, I'll try to help you." And it's relatively late at night on a Thursday night, and I go in and knock on a few of the doors of the people that I know, and everybody who I ask say, as you know, a few days ago I gave you some money. I don't have any more money to give, to share. And I go from door to door to door, nothing. And I walk into the tavern. In those days, every town had a tavern. I go into the tavern, get a little drink, sit down there, not sure what I'm going to do. Of course, I'm upset that I can't help this person, and I don't know what I can possibly do. And I'm sitting there and having my drink. And next to me, there's a rowdy bunch of people. One of the wealthy people of the town is sitting there with his buddies, and they're drinking, and they're loud, and they're screaming. And they see me sitting there, and one of them turns to me and says, "What are you doing here? You don't seem so happy. What's happening?" So I tell him my story. And the wealthy man has had quite a couple of drinks already, and he's in a good mood. Not so good, but good for him. And he turns to me and says, "You know what? I'll help you." And this person was not a very sharing person, but for a good time, he'll spend the money. He says, "You know what? I'll give you all the money that you need to help that poor man." He says, "But I have a caveat. You have to do something for me." I'm looking at him, half afraid, but of course I want to help that person. I say, "What is it?" He says, I want you, and it was already late at night, maybe 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, I want you to put on a clown suit and sing and dance with us throughout the town. And when we get to the end of the town and you've done what I've asked you to do, I'll give you the money. And now I'm thinking to myself, I was a relatively respectable person in town, and most of the people are asleep at this time, and in those, the main street was the main street, and most of the houses were on the two sides of the main street. Certainly we'd be waking everybody up. They'll be throwing things at me. Embarrassing. And I'm thinking back and forth, should I, shouldn't I? Then I say to myself, you know what? What do I want to do? I want to help another person. Let me do it even though it's going to be terribly, terribly uncomfortable and embarrassing. I put the clown suit on. We start going through town, and you can't imagine the racket that this guy and his buddies were made there, screaming and throwing bottles and making all kinds of lewd comments and cursing. And we're walking through town, and all the people are opening up their windows and looking down at us. And then they see me in a clown suit, leading this bunch of crazy people. And of course they start screaming, "How dare you!" And they mention my name, and this goes on for quite a while. We get to the edge of town. Of course I'm terribly embarrassed. My whole name is tarnished. The guy gives me the money. I rush home. Go first, of course, stop at the door of the man who needed the assistance, give him the money, go home, take off the clown suit, throw it to the back of my closet, hoping never to be reminded of that day again. Until today. And the Kabbalist turns to the man and he says, I want you to know that there's probably nothing that you have done in your life, and of course you're a tremendously sharing person. You've helped and assisted so many people, but there's probably nothing that you've done in your life that has revealed this much light. And he says, and I want you to know that the smell that emanates from this clown suit is the smell of the Garden of Eden. He says that when your day comes to leave this world, make sure that you're buried with this clown suit, because I promise you that it will get you directly into the Garden of Eden. And the lesson for us, of course, is this lesson. All the work that we do is great and is wonderful, and we could be spiritual people and we could be good people. But if we want to really achieve what we came to this world to achieve, to really complete the process of becoming God, we have to do what is uncomfortable. And the thing we have to remember is that everything else that we do should only be to support the uncomfortable actions that we take, because it is only those uncomfortable actions that break through the barrier of the ego, of the desire to receive for the self alone, and can bring us to becoming God. If we understand this completely, and this is one of those points, one of the most important aspects to remember, we now know that what we're going to do in our life is not simply be spiritual, but desire the uncomfortable situations. More often than not, we run away from them. But now we understand that not only do we not react to uncomfortable situations, but we desire them, we run after them. That's the first point. The first understanding we must have if we hope to become God. The second, which is connected to this one as well, is the idea of completion. Rav Ashlag taught that if we look at our spiritual work as a 10-rung ladder, if a person works and climbs from the first step to the second step to the third step to the fourth and goes all the way throughout his life, gets up to the 9th step, but doesn't complete the last step on the ladder, then almost one can say that his work was for naught. Because, and this hopefully is, to us at least now, is clear. What differentiates spiritual person and a good person from a person who's really on the path to completing his purpose in this world is that we understand where we want to go. We want to become God. And the question that we need to ask ourselves, again, we said before we need to ask ourselves one question. Not, am I doing the spiritual work, but am I doing the uncomfortable spiritual work? And here's a second question that we need to constantly ask ourselves. And this is and I have to say, when I this is one of those questions that comes from the lessons that the Kabbalists have taught, but the clarity of it is one that when I first heard it, I became very excited about, because it really sort of takes everything and makes it crystal clear. The question that we need to ask ourselves is, if I continue doing whatever work I'm doing, and every single one of us has a different path, some of us meditate more, some of us share more, some of us we do all kinds of things differently. But one question is true for all of us. And the question is, if I continue doing what I am doing now, how much I'm praying, how much I'm meditating, how much I'm connecting to the Zohar, how much I'm sharing, how much I'm destroying my ego, if I continue doing everything that I'm doing now in the way that I am doing it now, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20, in 30 years, do I really believe that I will be God? The work that I am doing now, if I do it for 5 or 10 or 20 or however long I think I'm going to have, is that going to make me God? Is that going to completely bring me to the end of the transformation? And if the answer is no, then we must make changes. Because again, and it's important that we clarify and never forget the difference between being spiritual and completing our journey, completing our purpose in this world. And to that end, every single day we have to ask ourselves. And I hope, I know when I ask myself this, it scares me, but also makes me change. Because if everything that we're doing now, if we continue to do it in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years, we'll simply be more spiritual people, or better people, or more sharing people, well, that's not what we're here for. We're not in this world to be a sharing person, to be a good person, to be a spiritual person. We are in this world to become God. We are in this world to break the barrier of the ego, of the desire to receive for the self alone, and connect 100% to the light of the Creator. And if the work that we're doing, if the spiritual work that we're doing is not going to get us there, well then we have to change what we're doing. Do more of it, do it differently. Those are decisions only we can make for ourselves. But the question that we have to constantly, every single day, ask ourselves is, this work that I am doing, to the extent that I am doing, with the time and energy that I put into it, if I continue on this path, will I become God? And this is one of those things, you have to be honest, but I think I speak for most of us. We have to do so much more. So much more. When it becomes clear to us that it's not about being spiritual, it's not about being good, it's about becoming God, it changes our outlook. It changes the way we judge ourselves, because unfortunately what happens, and this is, we all fall to this, we live in the world, and we look at the world, and unfortunately, whether consciously or subconsciously, we judge ourselves based on the metrics, on the people that we see around us, the world that we see around us. And yes, if we're spiritual and we're good and we're sharing, compared to so many other people, we're good people. But that's not the metric anymore. That's not the way we judge ourselves anymore. The only way we judge ourselves is with one question. Am I becoming God? Is the work that I am doing now, as I continue to do it, bring me to becoming God? And if the answer is no, then we have to take, and again, this is all about understanding, taking it seriously, and the clarity, and then what it makes us do. How much change do I need to do? What do I need to do differently? How much more ruthlessly do I have to destroy my ego to become God? Because as we get to the next part, we talk about the spiritual work, we talk about the logic, we talk about the things we need to do. And one of the most important aspects to remember, and this is probably one that we all know, but unfortunately aren't clear about, and clarity is the big difference, the big differentiator between a person who's going to achieve the end, the goal of becoming God, and a person who's not, is the clarity and consistency of clarity. There is the opponent. There is the opponent. There is whatever name you want to call him. In the Bible, at some point it's called Satan. The Kabbalists call it the desire to receive for the self alone. We can call it the ego. But we have to realize, and this is again one of these ideas that we need to get clarity on, that this opponent, what in the Talmud is called the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, this is a powerful force. It says in the Bible, Zelu Matzeh Bara Elokim, that the negative force is created to the power of the positive force. There is a very strong force. It is not simply our decision to say, I am going to become God, I'm going to understand this and use the tools that I need to become God. Every day that we wake up, and every night when we go to sleep, and unfortunately even while we're sleeping, the opponent is there. The opponent is there and coming up with ideas and schemes and ways to make sure that we do not transform. And we have to understand, again, one of these ideas, one of the things I hope to do with what we're talking about now and with the book is to clarify. We all know about the opponent. We know about the desire to receive for the self alone. But we have to have a clear understanding of what he is, what he does, and how strong he is, how smart he is. One of the greatest tricks that he's done, one of the most important works that he's done, is make us believe that he is us. When we wake up in the morning, or as we go throughout our day, and have a desire to go and act with our ego, We think it's us. Who wants to be number one? Who wants when somebody cuts him off to tell him off? Who wants when somebody gets me upset to try to get back at him? What is that? It's not me. But we all, we can talk about this from today till tomorrow, but tomorrow morning, those of us who have some sort of temper and somebody does something very nasty to us, our reaction and our conscious reaction will be, I'm going to get back at him. We have to realize, and again, this is one of those things that cannot and will not happen in a short period of time. But we have to understand that the biggest trick and the biggest difficulty that he has against us is that he's convinced us that he is us. That what we desire, what he desires is what we desire. What he wants to do is what we want to do. And the only way to begin this process of extricating him, that negative force from within ourselves, is by clarifying who he is, what he wants. He wants it, not me. He wants me to react, not me. He wants me not to share when it's uncomfortable, not me. He wants me to stay within my comfort zone, not me. And this is one of the most important points because, again, we can talk about it, but none of us truly do this because he's so smart. And we can hear it now, and hopefully we believe it now and we understand it now. But tomorrow and the next day and the day after and the week after and the month after, he's right there. And we're there and we think he's us. And can you imagine, if anything you're trying to accomplish, if you have a saboteur on your team working with you, you're never going to accomplish it. There's no way that we can become God as long as we do not consistently work on clarifying and defining who we are and who he is. The desire to receive for the self alone, the ego, the evil inclination, Satan, whatever name he is called in different places, that force is in our mind and in covering our souls. And he's telling us to do all kinds of things. And the first step to remove him is by clarifying that it's him and not us. And as long as we don't start doing that on a consistent basis, one of the, and we'll get to this a little later, it's the small battles. If we want to become God, we have to clarify to ourselves day in and day out that the negative desires, the fears that we have, all kinds of things that cause negativity in our lives do not come from us. They come from the desire to receive for the self alone, from the ego, from this negative force that is fighting against us. But what we've done is we've taken him in. We've allowed him to control us. He controls us. Think about how many times during the day you are doing things because of the desire to receive for the self alone. It's not our desire to receive for the self alone. The desire to receive for the self alone, the ego, all of those are tools that the negative side is using to keep us stuck in our box, to keep us from becoming God. And it's one of these, the Baal Shem Tov speaks about, somebody once asked him, how can it be? We all know, and as we speak about, we all have the light of the Creator within us, our soul which has all of that light, and it's covered simply by the desire to receive for the self alone. How can such a small, dark entity block so much light? And he says, take a coin and cover your eye from this light of the sun. If you cover your eyes, you see complete darkness. Use your hand. Is your hand more powerful than the sun? Of course not. But if we cover our eyes, we can see darkness when there is light, when there is sun shining. And that's what the desire to receive for the self alone. And the most beautiful thing, and Rav Ashlag speaks about this, and he uses an example which isn't so great, but it's really illustrative. Rav Ashlag in his book, he speaks about a worm that's living in the core of an apple. And all his life, he weaves and goes through the apple, and he thinks to himself, what kind of dark world has God created? It's so damp and dark in here. And he keeps on eating away at the apple, eating away, and who knows how long it takes, a little worm. And suddenly one day he pops through a cover of the apple, and he sees the beautiful world around him. And he realized that really this was there all along, and it was only he who was covered, and in the darkness and the dampness that he thought was the world, that he thought was life. And every single one of us, and this is one of the most exciting things about becoming God, everything that we know about our lives, the negative ones for sure, but even the positive aspects about our lives, can be so much more. Can be so much more than what they are because we're connecting to, on every level, whether it's a love you feel to a child. The love that we feel to a child is 1% of the love that we really can reveal. Why are we connecting to only 1%? Because of that darkness that we leave on us, the desire to receive for the self alone that we leave on us, if we remove him, if we work on removing him, then the light, the magnitude of light that we can connect to is so much beyond anything we can begin to understand. So, and certainly, we're not even talking about the negativity that it will remove. But the first point is clarity about who we are and who he is. When I desire to receive for the self alone, it is not I. It is the negative side. It is the desire to receive for the self alone. It is not me. When I want to react to somebody who's upset me, who's wronged me, that is not me. That is the negative side that is implanted, that we have allowed to implant himself within us and literally control us every day. And what we need to do is begin understanding this. And this is, call it a game in the mind, or whatever you want to call it, but this needs to be a constant consciousness. You're about to do something to somebody who's done something wrong to you. Think, who's doing this? Who wants to do this? And say and understand, it's not me. It is not me, it's him. It's a desire to receive for the self alone. What, am I stupid? Am I going to continue to breathe? Because every time we listen to his advice, we're hugging him stronger and stronger. We're bringing him deeper and deeper. Who wants that? Who wants his darkness? Who wants his negativity? So every single time, and of course we're going to, one of the things that's important to understand, we're going to fall. We're going to listen to him. It's not going to change, even no matter how excited or understanding we are of this concept. It's not going to change tonight, and it's not going to change tomorrow. And we're going to fall, and we're going to listen to him, and we're going to take his advice. But at least, let us clarify to ourselves who has given us this advice. I have fallen when we fall, not because I wanted it, but because I listened to him. That's the first step. Not even changing, of course, that's necessary as well, but clarifying when we fall. Why did we fall? Who did we listen to? It was him, not me. When I desire to receive for the self alone, whether I fall for it or not, make it clear in our mind, it was him, not me. When I act with my ego, even if I fall for it, remind myself, who was it? It was him, not me. And that's the first and most important aspect of beginning the removal of this negative entity from controlling our lives, is clarifying that the desire to receive for the self alone, the ego, the evil inclination, all those things are him, not me. And the thoughts that he gives us, the advice that he gives us in the way of thoughts and desires is him, not me. It leads us to his path, not to ours. It leads us to darkness, not to the light of the Creator. So the first and most important point to understand about the opponent, that he exists, that he's controlling us to whatever degree we're letting him control us, to the degree we're taking his advice and following his path, we're allowing him to control us. And the more we listen to his advice, the stronger we bring him into our lives. So when there's an important concept, make sure it's clear and make sure it stays clear. Because lack of clarity, ambiguity is one of the strongest tools that the negative side uses to keep himself with us and to keep us dark, to keep us disconnected from the light of the Creator. One of the more dramatic stories in the Bible is about Jacob. Jacob is traveling with his family, and he crosses the river, and he remembers that he's left something across the river. He goes across the river, and the story in the Bible goes, there is an angel, a negative angel, waiting there. The Zohar says that not only is it a negative angel, it is the negative angel. It is the king or the ruler of all negative angels. And in the Bible it says that they had a battle. The Kabbalists explain it wasn't a physical battle, it was a spiritual battle. It was the battle that each one of us goes through, but 10 million times more. And Jacob wins the battle. He doesn't let the angel control him. He doesn't listen to him. At the end of the battle, Jacob turns to the angel and he says, "Tell me your name." Which of course by itself is an interesting point. Why is it so important for Jacob to know the name of the angel? And even if it was important for Jacob, why is it important for us to know about it? The angel turns to Jacob and he says, "Why do you ask my name?" And then basically the angel leaves. And of course the question that the Kabbalist asks are twofold. First of all, of course, why was Jacob asking for the name of the angel? And second of all, why didn't the angel answer him? The angel answered, "Why do you ask my name?" And the Kabbalists teach that Jacob, we know that a name is the essence of a person. The name a person has and the name of a thing is the essence. It says about Adam at the creation of the world that God brought by everything in this world and all the animals, and he asked Adam to name everything in this world. Why? Because Adam had the ability to look into the essence of every being and know therefore what to name them, because the name signifies the essence, the power of anything. When Jacob is asking the angel, tell me your name, Jacob was asking it for us. He's saying, I want to be able to tell people, how is it that they will be able to extricate this negative force from their lives? What is your name? What is your power? What is your essence? What is the essence of the negative angel? And the negative angel didn't dodge the question. He answered the question. He said, why do you ask my name? Meaning, why are you delving to find my essence, the reasons for things? Why are you trying to clarify things? Don't clarify things. Leave them ambiguous. Don't worry about clarity. That is the essence and the power of the negative angel. This is one of the most important lessons that we need to learn if we want to be on this path to becoming God. That the essence and power of the negative angel is, why do you ask my name? Because he does not want us to ask his name. He does not want us to clarify things. He wants us to leave it ambiguous. He wants us to be good people. He wants us to be spiritual people. He wants us to connect to the Zohar. He wants us to pray. He wants us to share with people. He wants us to be really good people, that people will look at us and say, oh, there's a good person. There's a spiritual person. He wants all of that for us. There's one thing he doesn't want us to do. He doesn't want us to have clarity about our mission in this world, and he certainly doesn't want us to achieve it. He wants to leave us and hold us with him in the darkness that is where he lives. And the way he gets us to do that, day in and day out, is with the power of, why do you ask my name? Leave it ambiguous. Don't worry about the exact logic and reason of what you need to accomplish. Be a spiritual person. Leave it vague. Just be good. Share. Do all the good things. Be a good person. But don't try to clarify. And even if you clarify it once, don't keep it clarified. Wait a week and a month and make it ambiguous then. Become a spiritual person. One of the greatest gifts that Jacob gave us is this lesson. Why do you ask my name? And what we learn to the positive side, of course, if we want to defeat him, if we want to remove him from our lives, that source of darkness from our lives, we need to constantly be asking his name, constantly clarifying. And that's why when we spoke about the logic of change, we spoke about uncomfortability, we spoke about the completion of the process, this all comes back to clarity. All comes back to clarity. And one of the things I have to say when I share this with people, one of my greatest fears is that people enjoy what I'm saying, and that they're inspired even to some extent, and that a month later, and myself as well, we forget this. And we just, bob along life and be spiritual and do positive things and share and be good people, and everybody likes us and we're good people. That's what he wants. He wants to keep us in the comfortability, in the darkness of the desire to receive for the self alone. And the only way we can extricate him is with clarity. Keep on asking his name. Keep on saying to ourselves, why do I want to do this? Is it me or is it him? Why am I reacting this way? Is it me or is it him? Why am I leading my life this way? Is it me or is it him? Clarify, clarify, clarify. Keep asking his name. Because if you do that, then you'll get him out. Then you'll get him out. And it's a consistent work of clarification. It's one of these things that, if we don't do this all the time, we'll never do it. Ask and ask and ask and clarify and clarify and clarify. The third and most important thing, and we spoke about this a little bit last week, to help us, Rav Ashlag explains that the only thing we're allowed to hate in this world is a desire to receive for the self alone. The only thing we're allowed to hate in this world. Nothing else besides a desire to receive for the self alone. Why? And this is, we touched upon this last week, and it's important again to clarify. The desire to receive for the self alone, the ego, that dark force that uses all those tools, wants to control us, wants to leave everything ambiguous. But what he wants to ultimately do, as the Zohar says, he wants to kill us. He wants to kill us. He wants to make sure that we disconnect so strongly from the light of the Creator that, chas v'shalom, God forbid, a person achieves death. The Zohar in Genesis speaks about, everybody knows about the story about the Garden of Eden, that the snake spoke to, as it says there, and the Zohar explains, the snake bit Adam and Eve. What does that mean, the snake bit Adam and Eve? It's a dramatic picture, but what does it mean for us? What does it mean for our spiritual work? And this is what the Kabbalists teach. And as hopefully now we have more of the tools to understand this. At the creation of man, the source of all of us, there was an initial injection of venom. The venom of the snake that each one of us has within us. The desire to receive for the self alone, the ego. That was injected into Adam and Eve in the garden, or as they were leaving the Garden of Eden. And each one of us has that within us. And we have two paths then to go on. We either, and of course this hopefully clarifies some of the silliness of the way we act and live our lives, but we have two paths. We either begin removing the venom from ourselves and from our lives, or we bring more of it into our lives. Of course, we understand how stupid it would be for a person who's just been bit by a snake to try to bring another snake to come and bite him. But that is basically what we're doing. We know, of course, when a person is bit by a snake, the first thing that he's going to try to do, a venomous snake, is try to have somebody or in some way or another get the venom out of his body. But we do not do that. We not only keep the venom, unfortunately, in our body, in our soul, in our essence, we bring more of it on through our constant actions of desire to receive for the self alone. But when we clarify the fact that by doing that, by listening to his advice, and bringing more of that venom of darkness, of desire to receive for the self alone of the ego, what we're actually doing is bringing pain and suffering and death and darkness into our lives, then there's no way, if can you imagine, however you want to picture this, a person's running, a guy wants to stab, God forbid, somebody, and kill him, and usually he'd run away. Can you imagine somebody running and smiling, excited to go get the guy, stab him? But that, unfortunately, is the way we allow ourselves to go through life. We allow the negative side, the desire to receive for the self alone, tell us, take more of the venom. Act with your ego, act with your desire to receive for the self alone. Don't share when it's uncomfortable. Do all those things to bring more of the venom of the snake into your lives. What does he want to do? His greatest joy is at the end when a person is completely disconnected from the light of the Creator. When a person has, God forbid, achieved death. We have to awaken within ourselves a hatred of the desire to receive for the self alone. And hatred for the desire to receive for the self alone can only come through clarity. We spoke about clarity, but now we speak about hatred. And it's the only thing that we're allowed to hate, but we need to hate it. Rav Ashley explains that if a person does not have a true despise, he does not truly despise the desire to receive for the self alone, he'll never be able to remove it. The good news is that if a person truly despises the desire to receive for the self alone, it will leave by itself. And this is one of the beautiful secrets that Rav Ashley teaches, that our work isn't as difficult as removing the negativity from our lives, the negative from our lives, as much as it is to despise it, to hate it. Naturally, when we awaken that disgust to the desire to receive for the self alone, it will leave by itself. Our problem is that we're not only not pushing it out, we're bringing it in. But again, if we want to truly remove the desire to receive for the self alone, the negativity, the darkness that it brings with it, of the ego, of the evil inclination, of Satan, the only way we can do it is by hating the desire to receive for the self alone, for the simple reason. Why am I going to listen to him now? What does he want to do? I know what he wants to do. He wants to make me upset and sad and full of darkness and pain and suffering and eventually maybe even death. That's what he wants to do. What am I, stupid? I'm going to let him tell me how to live my life? I'm going to listen to his advice? Unfortunately, for most of us, it's not that clear because he's worked himself in to convince us that he's us. But as we begin this process, that's what we start doing. That's what we need to start doing. That's what the way we need to start thinking. Am I stupid? I'm going to listen to him? Why? Why? So he can help bring more darkness into my life, more pain and suffering, and literally awaken a hatred for the desire to receive for the self alone. Because there is no greater negativity, there is no greater force in this world that is trying to harm us. Everything that happens in our lives of a negative nature is caused by this whole essence of desire to receive for the self alone, of darkness, of disconnect from the light of the Creator, of Satan, of evil inclination. Why do we continue to want and desire to bring that closer to us? We need to start moving it away and start hating it and despising it. The only way we can truly become God, the only way we can completely disconnect from the source of darkness, of negativity, which is the desire to receive for the self alone, is if we remind ourselves day in and day out, and awaken within ourselves day in and day out, a hatred for the desire to receive for the self alone, for the ego, for the evil inclination. It's the only way. It's the only way we can begin this process, because again, if it just becomes, another thing I should do to be a more spiritual person, if it becomes another thing that I do to grow spiritually, we're not going to achieve the ultimate goal of becoming God. We're not going to become God. We have to awaken a disgust for the desire to receive for the self alone, and remind ourselves every time we're about to do an action, why? Why would I want to do that? Why would I listen to my ego? Why would I listen to my evil inclination? That all he wants to do is for me to bring him closer to me, to bring more of that darkness into my life, so that he can have his joy when I'm in pain, when I'm in suffering. We need to awaken a true and strong and constant and growing disgust and hatred for the desire to receive for the self alone. It's the only way that we can achieve this process of become and complete the process of becoming God. We talk about the tools that we have to achieve this, and one of them we spoke about a little bit last week, this idea of transformational sharing. There's a story in the Bible when Abraham wanted to find a daughter for his daughter Rebecca. And he sends his right-hand man, and he says, go find a husband for my daughter. And he travels far away, and he comes to the outskirts of the town of the city where he knows he will probably find the soulmate for Isaac. And he prays. He asks God for assistance. He says, make it so that when I come into this town, and I ask a girl to give me water to drink. Now, it helps to clarify the story when we understand a little bit of the background. Elazar, the servant of the right-hand man of Abraham, was one of the strongest people alive in that day. He was a big man, he was a strong man. And he was traveling with servants, tremendous amount of servants, and a whole crowd of camels and donkeys, and it was a huge caravan going with him. What does he ask? He says, God, when I come into town, and I ask one of the girls to give me a sip of water. I'm going to go to the well, and I'm going to stand there, and I'll ask one of the girls there to give me a sip of water. The girl that says, I will give you to drink, I'll give all the people with you to drink, and I'll give all of your camels to drink until they're not thirsty anymore. That is the girl, that is the soulmate for Isaac. Now, if you ask me, he's not asking for a spiritual woman, he's asking for a crazy woman. Because imagine any one of us, man or woman, who's standing by a well, and a huge, tough guy, comes to the well, and he has servants, endless amount of servants and camels. And he comes to a little girl, a little big girl, whatever age she is, or a man even. He says, give me a cup to drink. My reaction, any of our natural reaction would be, why don't you get your own cup of water? Why don't you draw your own water from the well? But even if we were a little bit more of a sharing person, we'd say, okay, you know what, I'm just picture this little girl say, okay, take a cup. But no, he wants more than that. He wants a girl who's going to look at 100 servants and a big strong man and maybe 100 camels and say, you know what, let me get the water for all of you. I mean, it's stupid. It's not spiritual. It's not a sharing action. It's a crazy action. And this, of course, leads us to one of the more important ideas and understandings about sharing. When a person, and this is one of the things that separates spirituality from true spiritual work and completion of becoming God. When a person understands that the reason I share is not because I want to be a good person, because I want to be a sharing person, because I have one goal in mind. I want to achieve complete connection to the light of the Creator. And the reason I want to achieve that complete connection is because I want to have endless joy and fulfillment and light in my life and no pain and no suffering. That's why I want it. Well, then that type of person will not look at the sharing as a good thing to do. It's a good deed. It's a positive thing. He'll jump on any opportunity to share because he needs it. Like air to breathe, or water to drink, or food to eat. I need it more than any of that because it's the only way I'm going to achieve my transformation. And Lazar knew this, and he knew that for Isaac's soulmate, it wasn't enough to find a person like any one of us who's a spiritual person or a good person. He needed to find somebody who understood. Now, of course, the level of heart understanding was much greater than ours. When Rebecca said, I'll give you the drink and everybody else, she wasn't thinking about Elazar or the servants or the camels. She was thinking about herself. She said, well, I have a situation here. What is the best way for me to use it? And she decided, she was obviously stronger than probably most of us, but she decided that she was going to share in a crazy fashion, in a way that none of us can begin to understand, not because she was a sharing person. This is the key. And this is what separates, because again, a sharing person or a good person or a spiritual person would not have made the decision that Rebecca made. Only a person who has clarity of purpose, of the purpose of sharing, of the purpose of the spiritual work, would have made that decision. And therefore for us, when we begin talking about really achieving change, really becoming God, we spoke about the negative. We spoke about why we're not going to act with our ego, with our desire to receive for the self alone. And the reason is because we know the consequence of that. We know the darkness of that. And we're going to hate the desire to receive for the self alone, and we're going to hate the ego, and we're going to do everything that we can to destroy it. Because why? Because we know that that's our path towards becoming God. Now the positive side. We're going to share. We're going to do actions of sharing, hopefully not comfortable actions, but sharing. Why? Never because, or I don't want to say never, but not because we're a sharing person. Not because we're a good person, but because we're going to grab those opportunities to come closer to God. And if that's not, and again, it's one of the things, people sometimes say, well, but aren't you supposed to be a good person? Aren't you supposed to be a spiritual person? That's not going to bring us. That's not going to bring us to the goal. That's not going to bring us to becoming God. And Elazar knew this, Isaac knew this, and Abraham knew this, and Rebecca knew this. And that's what made her different than any other sharing positive person. And when we take that into our lives, we need to clarify why we share. Why we share. Because sharing to do a good action brings us only so far. But sharing, because it is one of the most powerful tools for us to truly connect to the light of the Creator and truly remove pain and suffering from our lives and truly achieve fulfillment, then there's no end. We'll jump and jump and jump and grab and look for any of these opportunities, not because we want to share, but because we know what that can bring to our lives, what we need for that to bring into our lives. So when we talk about sharing, when we talk about transformational sharing, we talk about sharing with consciousness, we talk about sharing for the purpose of changing, not sharing for the purpose of sharing. And when we look at it that way, and one of the things about these concepts is that they have so many ramifications that hopefully as we begin living them, we begin to see. But when we look at sharing, the single most important reason we're sharing is because we want to transform, we want to become that much closer to God, then it changes everything about the way we do it. Very often when we share, we expect in return. But that's because we're not sharing. We're not sharing for the right purpose. We're sharing to get recognition, to get a thank you. When a person shares for the right reason, when a person shares because he knows this is the way that I'm going to become God, he's more happy that he doesn't get a thank you in return. He's thankful that he doesn't get any recognition for it, because he's not sharing for anybody else. He's sharing for him. He's ruthless now in his sharing. Why is he ruthless in his sharing? Because he wants, more important than that I breathe and that I eat is that I'm completely fulfilled every day of my life, and maybe even achieve removal of death. He's ruthless. And this is one of the ways, if we want to gauge how we're moving, if we're moving closer towards God or away from God, we need to gauge how ruthless we are in our sharing. And think about that. How many of us are ruthless in our sharing? Not how many of us share, how many of us are ruthless? Rebecca was ruthless. That's what Isaac needed for his soulmate. That's what, honestly, every single one of us needs. If we are to become God, sharing, is old news. We need to be ruthless in our sharing. But understand why. It's only when we understand and clarify to ourselves why we're sharing and become ruthless in that sharing that we can begin the process of becoming God. And it's one of the things, it's almost scary to think, but important to look back and think. How many actions of sharing we've done? And then think about them. How many of them were for the purpose of receiving something in return, for the purpose of getting a thank you, for the purpose of recognition, or even for the purpose of, I thought it was a good thing to do? And how many actions of our sharing are because I need it. I need to make this transformation from darkness to light, from desire to receive for the self alone, to becoming one with the Creator, to becoming God. And and again, it's one of those things it's not going to happen in a day or in a week. But if we constantly keep the focus and the clarity, why we share, then it changes everything about how, why, when, and what we share. Because it's no longer about doing a good thing. It's no longer about being a spiritual person. It's only for myself. I know that if I want to achieve that transformation and become God and achieve that ultimate fulfillment, which we are here for, It can only come with complete transformation. And that can only come with ruthless sharing. Jumping on every opportunity, begging for them and looking for them and hunting for them and hoping never to be recognized or any return on it. Because I'm doing it for my transformation, not for anybody else. So the two sides and the two most important concepts in the path of becoming God are hatred, despising, the desire to receive for the self alone, and ruthless sharing, ruthless transformational sharing. When we begin the process and continue the process of becoming God, it's important that we realize, one of the things that somebody asked me last week after the class was this idea of becoming God. And sometimes when you talk about things and you've been thinking about them for a while, things that are clear to you aren't so clear to other people. Why would we want to become God? And to me that seems, well, obviously you'd want to become God for many reasons, but one of them, besides of course, we'll call them the selfish or importantly selfish reasons. I want to achieve fulfillment for myself. I want to achieve no pain and suffering for myself, for my family. But one of the things that needs to excite, that this hopefully excites us about becoming God, is the type of influence that we can have in this world. And this is something that we need to remind ourselves. Many people do good deeds and have a desire to help other people. But the type of assistance that we can give, when we become God, is so much more than anything that we can do now. Anything. And therefore, one of the most, besides all the reasons of fulfillment for myself, no pain and suffering in my life and my family and the people around me, one of the most important reasons we need to want to become God is for the type of assistance that we can give to the world, the type of light that we can reveal in the world. And this is one of the most important concepts, because when we become, and again, we talk about becoming God, but the process is powerful as well. Just to give it numbers, just for clarity, if from 1 to 100, 100 being 100% connected and becoming God, and 1, the beginning of the process, complete desire to receive for the self-alone ego, and we're somewhere on that path of we're at 20 or we're at 30. Well, at 30, there's a certain light of the Creator that's shining through us. When you go from 30 to 50, the level of light is so much more. And therefore, the level of assistance and light that you can give to others and blessings that you can give to others and help and assistance on so many levels that you can give to others grows exponentially. And from 50 to 70, and of course, who's talking about 100? When we become God, that connection, you see people in pain, you can remove that pain. You see people suffering, you see people in even physical ailments, you'll be able to help them, to remove it. It's exciting, hopefully for us, and that we can achieve it. One of the things that the negative side is going to want to tell us is that we cannot achieve it, but we can, every single one of us. The reason we're here in this world is because we can achieve that, 100%. And the type of things that we'll be able to do in this world, we cannot begin to imagine. But we need to begin to imagine them. We need to begin to desire them. And I'd like to share a story. This goes back about 250 years. One of the great Kabbalists was, and this was on Saturday night, he was with his students, and they had a meal after the Shabbat. After the meal, he took his closest student and they went and stood by the window. And they stood there for maybe an hour or two, and they're standing by the window, and they're crying. They're crying there for 2 hours, and they're talking and they're crying. And after about 2 hours, the Kabbalist, the master, leaves the room, and the rest of the students come to the main student who was standing with the master by the window, and they ask him, what were you doing there for 2 hours? What was he talking to you about? What was he teaching you? And he says, our master, the Kabbalist, showed me all the light that will be revealed eventually in the world, and the joy and the fulfillment and the happiness that will come to this world eventually. And then he asked him, so then why were you crying? He says, because he also showed me all the pain and the suffering that the world will have to go through to get to that light. And that's why we were crying. He said, but the most important thing that I remember is the light that he showed me. The light that the world is ready for and is going to be achieved for this world. And the lessons that the Kabbalists teach for us from that story is that every single one of us has that window in our heart. And when we see another person who's in pain or is in suffering, we need to open that window and share some of our light with them. But the exciting thing is that window can grow. And that if I can help one person today to a certain extent, as I follow the path of becoming God, I can help so many more people in so many deeper and greater ways. So yes, we need to remember to have that window in our heart and open it when we see a person in need. But almost more important than that is to remind ourselves that we need to make that window grow. We need to make that window grow so that tomorrow and the next day and the month afterwards, we help more. We help each person more, and we help more people. And I'd like to end with I think now, it used to not be, but I think now is my favorite story. And the reason it's my favorite story now is because I went through 3 incarnations with this story, and I'll share them with you. The story is about the Baal Shem Tov. When the Baal Shem Tov was on his deathbed, when he was about to leave this world, he brought his closest students around him. And he told every single one of them what his purpose in this world is going to be. He came to the person who was his assistant for all those years, who literally was by his side for all those years, and he tells him, your job in this world, you were put in this world to go and tell stories and inspire people with stories about what you saw being next to me all these years. And the student turns to the Baal Shem Tov and he's a little bit disappointed. Of course, he knows this is what his job is in this world, but he's also wants a little bit, to be with his family. He'll have to travel now. He doesn't really enjoy traveling that much. So he says to his master, to the Baal Shem Tov, he says, how will I know that I've completed my work? How will I know that it's come time for me to stop traveling and telling the stories of you? And the Baal Shem Tov, before he leaves this world, he tells the student, he says, you'll know. So the Baal Shem Tov passes away, and this was on Shavuot. He passes away, and his assistant, his close student, begins the work. And he travels from town to town, from city to city, and he tells stories of the Baal Shem Tov, inspires people, helps people, uplifts people with stories about the Baal Shem Tov. And he comes from town to town, and every once in a while he travels back home. And after a few years of doing this, he hears that in a certain town, in a certain city, there's a person who pays a tremendous amount of money to hear stories about the Baal Shem Tov. And he's excited, he's thinking to himself, he says, if I have to do this, I might as well maybe make some money from it as well. So, it's not so close, he travels to that town. He arrives there on Friday afternoon, and he tells the man, he says, you've hit the jackpot, he tells him, not in those words of course. He says, I was with the Baal Shem Tov for so many years, I know an endless amount of stories, and I'm so glad and happy to share them with you. And you can tell that the wealthy man was very excited. He says, come stay with me in my house for the Shabbat and tell stories throughout the whole Shabbat. This is going to be obviously a wonderful, inspiring Shabbat. He doesn't remember any stories. Not one. Nothing. He's sitting there. Obviously he's becoming very embarrassed. And he says to the man, he says, I'm not sure whether I'm tired from the traveling or I'm not sure what it is, but I don't remember any stories now. And the wealthy man says, don't worry about it. There's tomorrow. They finish the meal. Comes Saturday morning. They do the prayers in the morning. And comes the meal on the Shabbat morning, and they're sitting at the table. And the wealthy man, of course, and after the second course, he turns to the student and he says, can you share with us a story? And the student can't remember anything. Not one single story. And of course now he's terribly embarrassed, and the wealthy man realizes this guy just, wanted a few free meals, let it be. Continue the meal. They do the third prayer on Shabbat, they come to the third meal on Shabbat, and the wealthy man is sitting there at the head of the table, and he looks down the table at the guy. He's not even sure if he should ask him anymore. It's been so embarrassing. And the guy, nothing. He doesn't remember a single story. Nothing. So, Shabbat ends. The guy, of course, is completely destroyed, embarrassed. He's a liar, obviously. So he packs up his bags quickly. He was supposed to stay there overnight, but he packs up his bags. He gets on his horse and gets out of town as quickly as he can. He's traveling for maybe 2-3 hours. It's already maybe 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And he remembers a story. And I was thinking to himself, if I go back there, I'll be back at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'll be tired. I'm going to have to wake him up out of sleep. And the way this weekend is going, I'll probably forget it by the time I get there. He's thinking, going back and forth in his mind. But then he says, this is what my job in this world is. My teacher, the Baal Shem, told me this is my job, to go and inspire people and tell them stories. How can I not do it? Goes back and forth. Eventually he decides he's going to go back. He travels 2 hours back to the house of the wealthy man. He knocks on the door at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. And surprisingly, the lights were on in the house, and the wealthy man opens the door, and his face is red and full of tears. And the student says, he says, I remembered one story. He says, but I have to tell you, it's one of the worst stories I know, because I don't know the beginning of the story, and I don't know the end of the story. I know the middle of the story. And the wealthy man says, don't worry, just tell a story, tell me the story. He tells him the following story. He says, once the Baal Shem Tov, as he often do, he heard that in a certain town there was a massacre that was planned to occur. And he traveled with me and some of his close students to be there. And we went there and we prayed there and we meditated there. And in the middle of our prayers, the Baal Shem Tov turns to me, his assistant, and he says, go and call the man, the head general who's going to do the massacre in this town, and tell him that I want to see him. Of course, I was apprehensive. This guy was not known to, he was a murderer, clearly not a person you'd like to anger or upset. But my master told me to do it, so I went. And I go and I go to the general and I say, my master, the Baal Shem Tov, wants to talk to you. And after a little bit of conversation, the general surprisingly agrees to come, and he comes back. And this man, this guy, he was a murderer. I mean, there was nothing that he had not done of a negative nature. He comes into the room, I lead him into the room with the Baal Shem Tov, and he sits there with the Baal Shem Tov. He was there for hours, the assistant says. Literally for hours, he says, and I don't know what happened in that room because I wasn't there. And the general left the Baal Shem Tov after a while, and never to be heard from again. The massacre, of course, didn't happen, and that was, enough for us, and we went home. He said, I don't know what happened to that man, I'm sorry, this is the story the only one that I remember. And the wealthy man looks at him, and he bursts in tears. He says, don't you recognize me? He says, I was that man. He said, and I want you to know that I'm not sure how, but when I was in that room with the Baal Shem Tov, he reached into my soul, and he awakened me like I had never been in my life. And I realized all the terrible things that I had done, and I began crying, and I asked the Baal Shem Tov after a while, he says, and the Baal Shem Tov was talking to me about what I can do, what I need to do, what I have to do. And I asked him, is there any way that I'll be able to cleanse all the negativity that I've done? And the Baal Shem Tov says, if you follow what I've given you to do, and he gave me a whole list of things to do, a whole way to live my life. He says, if you follow what I've told you to do, you will be able to cleanse it. And then I turn to him and I say, how will I know? What sign can I have that I will know that I have cleansed myself, that I've completed my correction? And the Baal Shem Tov told me, he says, if a person ever comes and tells you this story, then you'll know that you've completed the correction. He says, and that's why I've been spending all this money trying to hear stories, and all these years nobody's told me this story. He says, and I knew that when you came, I knew that there was that potential there. He says, and when you left my house, I realized that there was this opportunity that I was about to miss. And I prayed, and I cried, and I cried, and I prayed. And my prayers were answered. Now that's the basic story, and it's a beautiful story, of course. But when I first heard it, I have to tell you, and I've heard the story quite a few times from the time I was a child, I always knew it was a nice story. I never understood how, sort of the powerful lesson that there is here. And then a few years afterwards, I realized one powerful lesson. And that is the idea of always going to the end, because we never know where the end is. When the storyteller left the wealthy man's house, they each had a decision, a choice to make. The wealthy man could have very easily have said, you know what, forget about this guy, maybe I'll never make it, or maybe I'll just try again tomorrow. But he didn't. He took the opportunity then, and he cried and he prayed and he meditated when he could have given up, at least for that day, but he didn't. And the student as well had the ability to make a decision, to go back or not to go back, to do what was comfortable, or say, you know what, I have so many more people I'll tell stories to. But you know what the secret is? That was the completion of each one of their processes. And if either one would have said, I'll do better tomorrow, if either one of them would have said, I'm not going to push myself past the end tonight, they would have missed the opportunity of a lifetime. And when we talk about the process of becoming God and the importance of it, it's important we realize how important it is to take the opportunity every single time. Not, it's a little bit too difficult for me now, well then tomorrow, because we never know when that opportunity is there. And that's one lesson that I learned from it. It's a very powerful one, very important one. But the second one, which I just got recently, is that each one of us is the storyteller. And each one of us has people that are waiting for us all over the world, waiting for us to open up their heart, that window in our heart, to share with them, to teach them, to help them, to give them light. And the question we need to ask ourselves, and this is one of the, hopefully, ideas we leave with when we talk about becoming God, how can we allow those people to wait? whether it's tens, whether it's hundreds, whether it's thousands of people that we can and need to, are waiting for us to share with them, to give them. As we become God, as we start and continue this process, we need to keep in our minds all the time, there are people waiting for me and for you and for all of us. We don't know how many, we don't know exactly where they are, but every single one of us has people waiting for us to touch them, to help them, to give them light, to give them wisdom. And that is something we should never forget. And another point which sort of struck me in a deeper way, those of us who have children, there is nothing we would not do for our children. But we all know about the children that we have in this lifetime. We don't know about our children from previous lifetimes. And who knows, maybe somewhere in this world, there's one of our children from a previous lifetime, maybe one of our close friends from a previous lifetime, who's waiting for us to begin this process, to continue this process, so that we have the ability to touch them and help them. How can we take it easily? How can we not push ourselves as strongly as we can? Maybe a child, maybe a friend that we don't know, but is there for us, waiting for us. What we need to do is push ourselves incessantly, constantly, with clarity towards becoming God. And the type of light that we can give to the people that are waiting for us to give it to them will be endless. Thank you.